They weren't built for the masses. They were crafted in secret workshops, limited runs, or forgotten corners of history. Machines so rare, even seasoned collectors might not know their names, each hiding a story of ambition, risk, or sheer eccentricity. Lost prototypes, obscure imports, and forgotten legends, here are 12 ultra-rare cars you never heard of. The 1961 Gia L6.4 isn't just a forgotten luxury coupe from a dusty footnote in automotive history. It's a moving testament to an era when craftsmanship, discretion, and cultural fusion birthed creations so quietly magnificent that most of the world never even realized what glided silently past them. In many ways, it's less a car than a story sculpted in steel and chrome. A story that whispers of Italian ateliers, Hollywood backlots, late-night jazz clubs, and the kind of quiet power that only the truly confident ever sought. At first glance, the L6.4 might seem almost unassuming. Its lines are graceful rather than aggressive, its curves drawn by hand rather than computer, shaped by craftsmen in turn whose names will never appear in a brochure. But look longer, and you'll see the depth. The subtle downward sweep of the front fenders as they flow seamlessly into a gently rising beltline. The slender tail that tapers elegantly into polished chrome and soft leather. No gimmicks, no exaggerated fins or wild scoops, just the pure sculptural beauty that only Italian coach builders of that era seemed to master, honed to perfection over long, slow hours of hand finishing and quiet contemplation. Yet beneath that calm Mediterranean grace beats a heart as American as a Sinatra ballad drifting from a Sunset Strip lounge, Chrysler's mighty 383 cubic inch V8. This wasn't some high-strung European thoroughbred demanding constant attention. It was effortless, burbling torque, the kind that could carry the car's hand-built luxury shell across states, coasts, or entire continents without breaking a sweat. This unusual pairing, raw Detroit muscle cloaked in Italian tailoring, gave the L6.4 a unique duality. It had the power to surprise and the composure to never need to shout about it. Only about 26 were ever built. Let that sink in. Fewer than 30 dozen cars, each assembled by hand in Gia's small Turin workshops. Each subtly different because no craftsman's eye, no stitch of leather, and no sweep of a file is ever quite identical. The price? A staggering $13,000 at the time, more expensive than a new Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud. But unlike a Rolls, which declared status to the world in proud, upright formality, the L6.4 whispered its story only to those curious enough to listen. In that sense, it wasn't so much a car to be seen in, but a car for people who saw things differently. And who saw it? Hollywood's royalty mostly. Frank Sinatra, whose taste leaned toward the quietly exclusive rather than the obviously showy, famously had one. Lucille Ball, ever stylish but never vulgar, had one too. It's rumored a handful more sat in the discreet garages of music producers, actors, and power brokers whose names rarely made it into the gossip columns. These were people who understood the value of something unique, but saw no need to announce it to everyone on the boulevard. Inside, the L6.4 felt as though it had been designed not by committees or accountants, but by a small team of artisans whose only task was to build something as beautiful as their hands could manage. Soft glove leather seats embraced passengers in understated luxury. The dashboard mixed American practicality with Italian flourish, and every piece of wood or chrome trim was shaped and polished by human hands until it glowed softly in the California sun. There was no need for ostentation. The magic was in the details, the way the doors closed with a soft weight, the way the engine's hum felt more like a steady heartbeat than a roar. Yet, ironically, it's this very restraint, this elegant refusal to scream for attention that has made the Gia L6.4 so thoroughly obscured today. Unlike a Ferrari, it wasn't meant to race. Unlike a Cadillac Eldorado, it wasn't meant to dazzle crowds with size and chrome. Instead, it floated quietly, like a sculpture on wheels, past people who often had no idea they were watching one of the rarest, most beautifully balanced collaborations of American muscle and Italian artistry ever created. Today, almost nobody sees one. Even among seasoned car enthusiasts, the L6.4 is often just a footnote. Ah yes, that's the car Sinatra had. But to see it in person, curved flanks reflecting the city's neon, hand-shaped lines still perfect after more than half a century, is to glimpse a lost moment when cars could still be deeply personal, built not to please the market, but to delight a handful of dreamers. A time when American bravado and Italian elegance could meet not in noisy compromise, but in quiet harmony. In the end, the 1961 Gia L6.4 was never meant for everyone. It was a secret shared among a few, a car that asked its owners to look closely, and in doing so, revealed its true beauty only to those willing to really see. It remains a floating echo of that exclusive vision, gliding silently through history, nearly invisible to most, unforgettable to those lucky enough to catch even a glimpse.
The 1968 Howmet TX remains one of the wildest, most improbable, and downright rebellious chapters in motorsport history. A car so strange in concept and so mesmerizing in execution that even today it sounds like something out of an engineer's fever dream rather than a real machine that roared onto famous circuits and actually took the checkered flag. Imagine, for a moment, standing trackside at Daytona or Le Mans, expecting to hear the mechanical symphony of high-strung V8s or snarling V12s, only to be overwhelmed instead by the pure, relentless scream of a helicopter engine, winding up with an alien urgency until it drowns out everything else. That's the Howmet TX, the only turbine-powered race car ever to not only start, but to dominate a race, and leave behind a legend so strange it still feels slightly unreal. At its heart was the wildest idea of all. Why not ditch pistons, crankshafts, and valves entirely, and instead run a lightweight sports prototype on a turbine engine originally intended to spin a helicopter rotor? Built by Howmet Corporation, better known for manufacturing titanium and industrial parts, and designed by Ray Heppenstall, the TX, for Turbine Experimental, was an engineering statement as much as it was a racing project. It was as if the jet-age optimism of the 1950s had suddenly found its last hurrah right in the crucible of late 1960s endurance racing. The engine itself was a Continental TS325-1 gas turbine producing roughly 350 horsepower, but what really mattered was the otherworldly way it delivered power. Smooth, laggy, and shockingly linear, completely unlike the bark and bite of a conventional racing V8. And unlike piston engines, there was virtually no vibration. Drivers described the eerie feeling of being pushed forward by a force that felt endless and strangely detached, accompanied by a jet-like scream that made every bystander look skyward before realizing the sound came from a low silver race car streaking past. The throttle response was unlike anything else on the grid. Almost nothing at first, then an overwhelming surge of thrust as the turbine caught up, like someone flipping a switch on a jet engine. Only 2 chassis were built, but they were enough to turn heads and set records. The Howmet TX ran in the SCCA and even the World Sports Car Championship, entering legendary events like the 12 Hours of Sebring and the 24 Hours of Daytona. And in a testament to how radical engineering sometimes pays off, the TX actually won 2 races in 1968, not just participating, but taking first place, forever claiming the title of the only turbine-powered race car to win an officially sanctioned event. It also set several speed and lap records, proving that under the right conditions, the futuristic idea could compete with the best of Europe and Detroit. The Howmet TX wasn't without flaws, though. The turbine's throttle lag made it tricky to drive at the limit, and the car ran into reliability gremlins typical of experimental technology. Endurance racing, with its punishing mix of heat, vibration, and unpredictability, didn't suit a powertrain designed for steady, high-altitude flight. And then there were the rules. Racing authorities, nervous about the implications of a successful turbine car rewriting the rulebook, quietly adjusted regulations and fuel restrictions, making future entries impractical. The TX ended its brief competitive career almost as suddenly as it appeared, becoming an engineering ghost story rather than the start of a revolution. Yet its legacy is enduring and strangely romantic. Today, both original Howmet TX cars survive, sometimes making appearances at vintage events. And even now, decades later, the sight and sound of that screaming turbine draws crowds just as it did in 1968. People still can't quite believe it really happened, that someone dared to take a machine built for the sky, drop it into a sleek, low-slung sports prototype, and challenge the established giants of motorsport with a weapon so alien it barely even shared a vocabulary with them. The Howmet TX remains a rolling reminder that racing has always been, at its best, about the crazy, the improbable, and the just maybe possible. In a world where most radical ideas never leave the sketchbook, the TX roared past the doubters into racing history, if only for a brief, glorious moment. Even now, its story feels like a legend whispered among those who truly love racing. Proof that for a little while, someone really did strap a helicopter engine into a car and set it loose on the world's fastest tracks and even won. And that, somehow, is even more unbelievable today than it was back then.
The 1966 Marcos 1800 GT is the kind of car story that sounds half made up, even to seasoned classic car enthusiasts. A tiny British sports car built quite literally out of wood, powered by a durable Swedish Volvo engine and shaped like something an eccentric designer might have sketched on a cocktail napkin after one too many pints. Yet every part of it was real, and somehow, improbably, it worked. It drove beautifully, raced competitively, and charmed its small cult of owners so thoroughly that they forgive and even love its many eccentricities to this day. Picture it, a swooping, impossibly low coupe with pop-up headlights and curves so exaggerated it almost looks cartoonish from some angles, all built around a monocoque chassis, crafted not from steel or aluminum, but from carefully laminated sheets of marine plywood. This wasn't a cost-saving measure or a gimmick. The car's creators, Jem Marsh and Frank Costin, whose background in aeronautical engineering had already taught him that wood could be both incredibly light and incredibly stiff, believed that a wooden monocoque offered the perfect mix of strength and low weight. It sounds insane until you remember this was the same era when de Havilland mosquito bombers, made largely from plywood, had proven both strong and fast in combat. But in a road car, it still felt delightfully subversive. Power came from the robust Volvo B18 engine, a 1.8-liter inline-4 that wasn't exotic but had a reputation for running forever, which turned out to be a perfect match for a car whose construction required a leap of faith. And thanks to its light weight, around 1,600 pounds, and excellent aerodynamics, the Marcos 1800 GT could keep up with bigger, costlier sports cars of the day. It wasn't brutally fast, about 110 miles per hour top speed, but it was quick enough, and more importantly, it felt alive in your hands, the kind of car that always seemed to shrink around you the harder you drove it. And you did have to shrink yourself to fit in. The interior was famously tight. Low roof, wide sills, pedals offset just enough to make your left knee brush the steering wheel on downshifts. Owners spoke of climbing in and out like they were putting on a tailored suit, and once you were in, it felt like wearing the car rather than sitting inside it. Visibility was surprisingly good, thanks to the big wraparound rear window, but there was almost no room to stretch or slouch. As one owner famously put it, "It's all charm, no comfort." Yet that very stubborn, eccentric focus made it endearing. It wasn't trying to be all things to all people. It was light, responsive, and purely designed around the joy of driving, the kind of sports car where you didn't mind the noise, the heat, or the occasional creak from the wooden structure, because every journey felt like an event. Even its flaws felt like part of its personality. Occasional water leaks through the fiberglass wood seams, the quirky pop-up headlight mechanism, the tight cabin that forced you to learn a sort of ballet every time you got in or out. Fewer than 100 were built in this original wooden chassis form between 1964 and 1969, making survivors genuine unicorns today. Some ended up as track toys, others as weekend curiosities, each aging differently depending on how lovingly or carelessly the wood was protected from damp British weather. Over the years, Marcos later switched to steel chassis designs, which solved many of the practical problems, but also lost some of that mischievous originality that made the early cars feel like a secret club. Look at a Marcos 1800 GT today, and it still feels almost alien. Low, wide hips, impossibly small grille, and a presence that draws people over not because it's loud or flashy, but because it's quietly weird and undeniably charming. It's proof that sometimes the most memorable cars come not from vast corporate studios and wind tunnels, but from stubborn visionaries in small sheds who think, why not build a sports car out of wood? And maybe that's why, all these decades later, the 1800 GT still tugs at the imagination. It's not just rare, it's beautifully unnecessary, gloriously impractical, and the product of the kind of mad optimism that made the 1960s the golden age of truly handmade sports cars. For those who've owned or driven one, it becomes less a car and more a story you live inside. Tight-fitting, occasionally leaky, but unforgettable every mile. The 1967 Moes Ostentatian Opera Sedan is the kind of automotive fever dream, so surreal it sounds like the punchline to a joke whispered in a smoky bar. And yet, against all odds, it actually happened. Conceived by Bruce Moes, an eccentric inventor who once made his fortune selling tire sealant to NASA and then decided that the next logical step was to redefine luxury motoring itself. The Ostentatian is what happens when limitless ambition collides with total disregard for convention, proportions, or even good taste, and somehow produces a masterpiece of pure, unfiltered weirdness. Imagine it parked in front of you. A rolling aluminum fortress so brutally square it makes a brick look aerodynamic, wearing oversized off-road tires better suited to a desert expedition than a luxury boulevard cruiser. At nearly 7 feet wide, it looked as if it had been milled from a single solid ingot rather than assembled. The body panels were hand-formed aluminum, squared off with flat sides, a nearly vertical windshield, and a towering, blunt front end. Everything about the Ostentatian looked heavy, massive, and weirdly intimidating, like an armored parade car designed for an alien diplomat. But the real absurdity only begins when you try to get inside. Forget ordinary doors. The entire side of the car hinged outward, carnival ride style, allowing passengers to step in, or more accurately, climb in, with all the drama of boarding a lunar module. The logic? Safety, of course. According to Moes, these massive side gates reduce the danger of being struck while opening a door into traffic. In reality, they simply added to the outlandish theater, turning every entrance and exit into an event worthy of a camera flash. Inside, things got even stranger. Plush velvet and brocade, deep shag carpet, gilt trim and nightclub lighting that looked like it had been borrowed from a 1960s Vegas lounge. The seats were more like cushioned thrones, arranged for maximum conversation rather than any modern sense of ergonomics. There was a television, naturally, because how could the world's most luxurious car not include one? And the glass? Bulletproof, of course, because in Bruce Moes' vision of true luxury, protection from assassins was apparently as essential as air conditioning. Underneath this monument to eccentricity lay a practical, if uninspiring heart, a 304 cubic inch, about 5-liter International Harvester V8, chosen not for its power or refinement, but for sheer durability and the torque needed to haul this aluminum leviathan down the road. And, curiously, those oversized tires and high ground clearance meant it could, in theory, handle dirt roads or fields, because why wouldn't the world's most luxurious sedan also double as an off-road explorer? The Moes Ostentatian Opera Sedan wasn't just built to turn heads, though it absolutely did that wherever it went. Moes truly believed he was creating the safest, most advanced luxury car on Earth. He envisioned it as a limousine for royalty, dignitaries, or ultra-wealthy individuals who valued security and opulence above all else. Yet he completely ignored the aesthetic conventions of beauty, the subtleties of ride quality, and any practical sense of what a luxury car buyer might actually want. The result was something so wildly overbuilt and ungraceful that it circled back around into a kind of singular brilliance. It was so hideous, so impractical, and so thoroughly bizarre that it became hypnotic. Only one was ever built, partly because nobody in their right mind was going to order another, and partly because even Bruce Moes realized that manufacturing more would bankrupt him. Yet that single car did appear in shows, on television, and in automotive museums, where it continues to baffle, amuse, and fascinate anyone who lays eyes on it. Decades later, the Moes Ostentatian Opera Sedan stands as the loudest possible reminder that sometimes visionaries, freed from the constraints of mass-market taste, produce something utterly unique. Not beautiful, not usable, and not even successful, but so wildly individual that it can never be mistaken for anything else. It's part concept car, part art installation, and part personal fantasy, born from the mind of a man who looked at a Cadillac Fleetwood and thought, that's just not quite enough. In the pantheon of automotive history, it remains an unrepeatable legend, a single, glorious monument to excess, ambition, and delightful weirdness. And that, truly, makes it unforgettable.
The 1974 Monteverie High450 SS is the kind of car that feels almost mythical, the rare breed of supercar whose existence sounds more like a rumor whispered among enthusiasts than a chapter you'd actually find in a history book. And yet, behind that mysterious reputation lies a very real machine, a razor-sharp Swiss wedge stuffed with raw American muscle, built to take on the most exclusive names in Italy, but which ultimately flickered out before most of the world even noticed it had arrived. Peter Monteverdi, the man behind it, was not content merely building elegant GT cars for well-heeled businessmen. By the early 1970s, he set his sights on something much bolder: to step onto the same stage as Ferrari's Berlinetta Boxer and Lamborghini's Miura and prove that a small Swiss manufacturer could produce a true mid-engine supercar that didn't just look exotic, but could run with the fastest in the world. The answer to that ambition came in the form of the High450 SS. High meaning shark in German, and the number 450 a nod to its fearsome power output. And fearsome it was. Under the dramatic rear hatch sat Chrysler's legendary 7-liter Hemi V8, making around 450 horsepower. A monstrous figure for the time, especially when stuffed into a chassis lower than your belt buckle. The choice of a big American engine wasn't just about brute force. Monteverdi had already built relationships importing and tuning Chrysler-powered cars, and the Hemi promised near-limitless torque with surprising reliability, giving the High a character unlike anything coming out of Modena or Sant'Agata. Wrapped around that engine was a body so striking it almost looked computer-generated, decades before computer-aided design even existed. The High stood just over a meter tall, with a wide, flat hood that seemed to vanish under the horizon, hidden headlights, and fenders that swept dramatically upward to meet a sharply cut rear. It looked alive even when it stood perfectly still, especially painted in the vivid candy apple red or deep metallic purple Monteverdi chose to make sure it turned heads wherever it went. Performance figures were suitably outrageous. Monteverdi claimed a top speed of nearly 180 miles per hour, and 0 to 60 in around 4.9 seconds. Numbers that, if true, would have put it on the podium with the era's most heroic exotics. But these figures were more theoretical than proven. The High was never raced or tested independently by the press, leaving its legend built mostly on bold claims and the hush of the show stands where it briefly appeared. Because in the end, the High 450 SS was more dream than dynasty. Only 2 original examples were built. One appeared at the 1970 Geneva Motor Show in a bold purple. Another surfaced later in red. Both toured auto salons in Europe, tantalizing onlookers, who for a moment could imagine Switzerland challenging the supercar crown. Yet the real world proved less kind. The oil crisis hit, the market for ultra-exotic cars shrank, and the cost of hand-building such a complex, low-volume, mid-engine machine made full-scale production impossible. Most people never saw a High in person. Even serious collectors often never glimpsed one outside of photographs. It wasn't in posters on bedroom walls, nor featured in glamorous race victories or glossy magazine centerfolds. Instead, it became one of those did-you-know stories passed between the most obsessive car historians. A machine so rare and so audacious that even in obscurity, it shines brighter for it. Today, the 2 original cars survive, joined by a handful of replicas built by Monteverie himself decades later from spare parts. But the High remains an elusive spirit, a wedge of aluminum and fiberglass that embodies the wild optimism of the early supercar era. The idea that a small, determined team could walk onto the same stage as Ferrari and Lamborghini armed with nothing but vision, courage, and a huge American Hemi, and maybe, just maybe, build something to scare the greats. It was over the top, dramatic, and heartbreakingly brief. And that fleeting glimpse of what could have been is precisely what makes the High 450 SS unforgettable to those who know its name. A shark that barely surfaced before disappearing into the depths of automotive legend.
The 1971 AC428 Frua is the kind of car that feels like it slipped through a crack in time, a machine born from 2 worlds that rarely met, the brutish power of an American V8 and the impossibly elegant tailoring of an Italian coach builder. Even among enthusiasts, it's a car that barely registers, which makes it all the more fascinating because behind its quiet disappearance lies one of the most effortlessly glamorous, exotically understated grand tourers of its era. To understand how the 428 came to be, you have to look at AC cars as they stood in the late 1960s. By then, AC's fame rested on the Cobra, a fire-breathing Anglo-American hybrid that terrified racetracks and highways alike. But the Cobra was raw, loud, and barely civilized. AC realized there was a different kind of customer. Someone who craved the same big block thrills, but wrapped in something far more refined. Something that wouldn't look out of place parked outside the Hotel de Paris in Monte Carlo. So AC turned to Pietro Frua, one of Italy's most distinctive stylists, known for his bold, perfectly proportioned grand tours. Frua draped the car's tubular frame in a shape that blended the sleekness of a Maserati with the restrained class of an Aston Martin. A long, tapering hood, crisp beltline, and a muscular but not exaggerated rear haunch. It had subtle scoops, delicate bright work, and an understated aggression, a car that whispered power rather than shouting it. Underneath that suave skin lay something far less restrained, a thundering 7.0-liter Ford FE big block V8, shared with the later Cobras. It made over 345 horsepower, an immense figure at the time, which pushed the 428 to a claimed top speed around 140 miles per hour. And unlike many Italian exotics of the day, the AC428 could do it without complaint. With torque everywhere in the rev range, it could lope along the Riviera all day in high gear and still savage an autobahn when asked. Inside, the cabin was pure old-world grand touring. thick leather seats, real wood veneer, Smith's gauges, and a sense of quiet sophistication that matched the exterior. It wasn't cramped like some Italian thoroughbreds. This was a car meant to cross countries, not just impress onlookers for an hour. And yet, despite its near-perfect recipe, the 428 was always destined to be rare. Each car was hand-built, shipped as a rolling chassis to Frua's workshop in Turin, bodied by hand, then sent back to England for final assembly. This was an excruciatingly expensive process, and it showed in the price. The 428 cost more than many Ferraris of the time. AC simply couldn't compete on volume or badge prestige. Worse, the timing was cruel. The oil crisis of the early 70s hammered demand for thirsty V8 Grand Tours. Emissions regulations in key markets made certification increasingly expensive. And while the car was fast, beautiful, and exclusive, it never had the racing pedigree or showroom draw of the Cobra. It was too refined to be a rebel and too obscure to be a true status symbol. In total, only about 51 cars were built, roughly 29 coupes and 22 convertibles, though the numbers vary slightly among historians. Each one unique in trim and detail, often built to the owner's wishes. And so, the AC428 Frua quietly faded from public view. Even many who know the Cobra by heart have never seen one in person. Today, the few survivors live quiet lives in private collections and occasional concours lawns, where those who know can marvel at the understated brilliance of a machine that never got its due. It was never meant to dominate racetracks or be the fastest thing on paper. It was built to carry two people and their luggage across continents at enormous speed and in near total comfort, wrapped in a shape that still stops people in their tracks half a century later. The 428 Frua is the definition of hidden luxury, a car that never chased headlines, but for those lucky enough to experience it, offered a blend of effortless power and handcrafted Italian elegance that even the big names rarely matched. And perhaps that obscurity is part of its mystique, a reminder that some of the world's most special cars were never the loudest or the best known, but the ones that existed quietly in the shadows, known only to the few who truly understood.
The 1968 Bizerini 5300 GT Strada is one of those rare cars that feels like a whispered legend among those who truly love automobiles. A machine born from racing genius, shaped by Italian passion, and powered by raw American muscle. Even at first glance, it looks different, impossibly low, hunched forward on its haunches like a predatory cat about to pounce, with a roofline barely higher than the door handles of modern cars. And behind that striking form is a story that feels almost as daring as the car itself. Giotto Bizerini, its creator, was not just another name in the crowded Italian sports car scene. By the time he set out to build the 5300 GT, Bizerini had already helped shape the Ferrari 250 GTO, arguably the greatest GT racer ever built. But after a famously dramatic falling out with Enzo Ferrari during the infamous Palace Revolt of 1961, Bizerini moved through various projects, from working on the Iso Grifo to designing engines for Lamborghini, before finally deciding to put his own name on the nose of a car. And what a nose it was! The 5300 GT Strada's body, crafted mostly from aluminum alloy by Carrozzeria Bertone, sat atop a tubular space frame chassis that Bizerini himself designed. The car's proportions were bold even by Italian standards. A long, tapering hood stretching out in front of a near-vertical windscreen, and a cabin set far back over the rear wheels. The rear glass sloped gently down to a stubby tail, with delicate quad tail lights peeking out beneath. It wasn't overdone, but it looked like pure speed, the kind of shape that could only come from an engineer obsessed with aerodynamics, not just styling. Under the hood sat an unexpected heart,
a Chevrolet Corvette 327 cubic inch, 5.3-liter, small block V8. In an era when many Italian exotics still struggled with temperamental, high-strung engines, this American lump was robust, reliable, and deceptively sophisticated. It made roughly 365 to 385 horsepower in road trim, and because the 5300 GT weighed just over 1,200 kilograms, less than many modern hatchbacks, the result was staggering performance. 0 to 60 in under 6 seconds, and a top speed north of 170 miles per hour, enough to worry even Ferrari's mighty Daytona. The driving experience matched the numbers. Owners often describe the car as ferociously alive, with near-perfect weight distribution, thanks to the engine being pushed so far back it was almost front mid-mounted. The car's lightness meant it felt agile and urgent, and yet the iron-block Chevy V8's broad torque curve made it surprisingly civilized at lower speeds. Every car was different, subtly or not. Built largely by hand, the 5300 GT Strada models varied in trim, details, and even exact specifications. Some had full interiors and creature comforts, others were closer to stripped-out race cars. Bizerini offered an even wilder Corsa version for the track, though most customers opted for the slightly softer, leather-lined Strada. Yet despite the brilliance of the machine, production remained tiny. Over roughly 5 years, only around 133 examples left the workshop, a whisper compared to Ferrari or Maserati's numbers. Part of the reason was price. These cars cost as much as the best Ferraris of the day. But part of it was Bizerini himself, a man obsessed with engineering, but interested in the business side of running a car company. The project burned bright, then burned out, as so many small-volume Italian makers did. And perhaps that's why today, the 5300 GT Strada remains a car people struggle to name at first glance. It has all the cues of an Italian thoroughbred, the proportions, the curves, the presence, but it doesn't say Ferrari, Maserati, or Lamborghini across the hood. Instead, it carries the name of a man who helped shape some of those great marks from the shadows before finally stepping out to build something of his own. To those who know, the 5300 GT Strada isn't just another rare exotic. It's a physical expression of one man's philosophy, that brilliant engineering should always be at the heart of beauty, and that real performance comes from simplicity, balance, and ruthless weight saving, not just badge prestige. It remains one of the great hidden gems of the 1960s supercar world, a low-slung, big-hearted masterpiece, quietly reminding anyone lucky enough to see one in the wild that sometimes the greatest cars are the ones whose names are almost forgotten. And that, in a way, makes them even more special. The 1970 Monteverie Safari stands as one of the most intriguing and underappreciated pioneers in the history of luxury off-road vehicles, a true visionary creation that emerged long before the SUV craze swept the globe. At a time when the automotive world was dominated by traditional sedans, muscle cars, and boxy utility trucks, Monteverie dared to dream differently. The Swiss automaker, founded by Peter Monteverdi, sought to fuse rugged off-road capability with the refinement, power, and exclusivity usually reserved for high-end European luxury cars. The Safari was born from a clever marriage of Swiss craftsmanship and American mechanical ruggedness. Its foundation was the International Harvester Scout, a proven workhorse known for its toughness and go-anywhere attitude. But rather than leaving it as a utilitarian and somewhat plain vehicle, Monteverdi transformed the Scout's basic bones into a sumptuous yet capable luxury SUV. The company replaced the standard bodywork with a boldly styled angular shell that immediately commanded attention. Its broad, flat planes and sharp edges gave the Safari a distinctive, aggressive stance, blending the raw strength of an off-roader with the clean, minimalist lines of European design. Inside, the transformation was even more dramatic. Monteverdi lavished the Safari with high-grade leather upholstery, polished wood trim, and painstaking attention to detail that rivaled the finest European sedans. The cabin was not just comfortable, it was a sanctuary, a rolling statement of wealth and exclusivity that felt worlds apart from the utilitarian origins of the Scout. Unlike most trucks or SUVs of the era, the Safari didn't just get you where you needed to go. It wrapped you in luxury the whole way. Beneath the refined exterior lurked serious American muscle. Monteverie equipped the Safari with a range of powerful V8s, often sourced from Chrysler or Ford, delivering robust performance that ensured the vehicle could handle rugged terrain as easily as it could cruise city streets or European highways. The engine choices were deliberate, offering a blend of torque and power that complemented the Safari's hefty weight and grand ambitions. This was no mere showpiece. It was a genuine, capable 4x4, ready to face demanding conditions without losing an ounce of elegance. Despite its groundbreaking concept and the combination of luxury and utility, the Monteverie Safari was produced in very limited numbers, fewer than 100 units over its brief production run. This rarity was partly due to the complexity and expense of hand-building such a niche vehicle, and partly because the automotive market at the time was not quite ready for this blend of luxury and ruggedness. Many of these rare machines have since disappeared, lost to time, off-road adventures, or simply forgotten amid the flood of more mainstream SUVs. Today, the Safari stands as a remarkable testament to foresight and innovation. Long before the likes of the Range Rover, Mercedes-Benz G-Class, or Bentley Bentayga redefined what an SUV could be, Monteverie had already crafted a vehicle that married power, luxury, and off-road prowess into a singular statement. It was an SUV for the elite, designed for those who wanted their vehicle to be as commanding on the road as it was comfortable in the cabin. Collectors and automotive historians now regard the Monteverie Safari as a hidden gem, a rare Swiss creation that anticipated the SUV boom decades before it arrived. Its bold styling, luxurious appointments, and powerful underpinnings continue to captivate enthusiasts who appreciate vehicles that dared to defy convention. The Safari is not just a car, it is a symbol of visionary thinking and a rare link between rugged American practicality and refined European elegance. It quietly set the stage for the modern luxury SUV market, a segment that today dominates the automotive landscape worldwide. In retrospect, the Monteverie Safari is more than just a curiosity or footnote. It's a reminder that innovation often arrives well ahead of its time, waiting patiently for the world to catch up. For those lucky enough to encounter one, the Safari remains a breathtaking fusion of power, style, and exclusivity, a rare jewel in the story of automotive evolution. The 1953 Sedan 208S stands as one of the most enchanting and rare jewels from the golden age of Italian sports cars, an era when craftsmanship, passion, and performance merged into rolling works of art. Born from the small Turin-based company Seata, originally a boutique tuner and performance parts specialist for Fiat, the 208S marked a bold leap into the creation of an entirely bespoke roadster that exuded style, agility, and racing pedigree. It was a car designed not for mass production or commercial success, but for those connoisseurs who truly understood and cherished the intoxicating thrill of lightweight, purebred sports cars. At its heart was a uniquely Italian 2.0-liter V8, an engineering marvel derived from Fiat components, but carefully reworked and refined by Seata's skilled engineers. Producing just over 110 horsepower, the engine might seem modest by today's standards, but when paired with the car's featherlight chassis, barely tipping the scales at just over a ton, it resulted in a spirited and agile performer. The 208S was less about brute force and more about finesse. Its power-to-weight ratio gave it the ability to dance through corners with a nimbleness that rivaled far more powerful machines. It was a car that demanded driver skill and rewarded precision, offering a visceral connection between man, machine, and the open road that few cars could match. The design of the Sedan 208S was a masterclass in understated elegance. Its body was crafted with slender, flowing lines that captured both grace and function, evoking the sensual beauty of a sculpture in motion. Unlike the flamboyant and ostentatious designs of some contemporaries, the 208S embraced a refined simplicity, its delicate curves and taut surfaces reflecting the Italian design ethos of less is more.
The car featured tiny suicide doors, hinged at the rear, that added a touch of dramatic flair while also providing practical access to its snug cockpit. Inside, the cabin was minimalist, yet thoughtfully appointed, placing the driver at the center of attention with an instrument panel that was straightforward but evocative of racing heritage. The car's rarity only adds to its mystique. With approximately 35 examples ever built, the Sedan 208S was always destined to be a collector's dream and an enthusiast's treasure. Among its most famous owners was the legendary actor and racing enthusiast Steve McQueen, who famously dubbed it his Little Ferrari. This nickname was no empty compliment. The 208S possessed an exhaust note that was pure poetry, singing like a small-bore racing car with a high-pitched bark and crackle that stirred the soul. To McQueen and those lucky enough to experience it, the car was more than just transportation. It was a companion on winding back roads, a machine that embodied the joy, freedom, and raw excitement of driving during a bygone era. Despite its limited production and relative obscurity compared to marquee Italian marques like Ferrari or Maserati, the Sedan 208S carved out its own niche in the pantheon of classic sports cars. It captured the imagination of purists and collectors who value lightweight agility, meticulous craftsmanship, and that elusive feeling of total harmony between engine and chassis. Its allure is timeless, an invitation to step back into a time when cars were mechanical symphonies built with passion and personality rather than mere appliances. Today, surviving examples of the Sedan 208S are prized for their rarity, their elegant design, and their spirited driving experience. They remind us of an era when small manufacturers dared to dream and build cars that celebrated driving as an art form. The 208S is not just a vintage sports car. It is a symbol of Italian ingenuity, of a moment when engineering and artistry converged to create machines that were alive with character and soul. Owning or even witnessing a Sedan 208S is like holding a piece of automotive poetry, an evocative reminder of how thrilling and pure motoring once was, long before the advent of modern electronics and mass production. In essence, the 1953 Sedan 208S remains a shining example of a forgotten chapter in automotive history, a tiny but mighty roadster whose whispers still echo in the hearts of car lovers worldwide. A true little Ferrari, whose legacy endures far beyond its small production run.
The 1965 Gordon Keeble GK1 is one of those rare automotive gems that perfectly captures the spirit of 1960s grand touring in all its complexity. A captivating fusion of British ingenuity, Italian artistry, and raw American muscle. It is a car born from passion and ambition, designed to deliver the best of all worlds at a time when the GT segment was evolving rapidly and fiercely competitive. What makes the Gordon Keeble truly unforgettable is how it marries these distinct influences into a package that feels both timeless and refreshingly unique, yet also tells a story of struggle, innovation, and a dream that burned brightly, even if only briefly. At its core, the Gordon Keeble GK1 was a grand tourer crafted to combine beauty, comfort, and power. The sleek, elegant exterior was penned by the legendary Bertone Design Studio, renowned for their ability to sculpt cars that balance sophistication and sportiness with European flair. The GK1's shape is clean and minimalist, with smooth flowing lines that don't shout for attention, but command it quietly and confidently. Its low-slung stance, gently curved fenders, and restrained chrome details give it an aura of understated luxury, the kind of car that invites closer inspection, rewarding observers with subtle design cues rather than gaudy excess. Its Italian styling gave the Gordon Keeble an exotic edge, setting it apart from its British contemporaries that often leaned more on tradition than bold design. However, beneath this refined exterior beat a heart of pure American muscle, the Chevrolet 327 cubic inch V8.
This engine was a game-changer for small British automakers at the time, offering a robust, reliable, and well-understood power plant that could deliver impressive performance without the headaches sometimes associated with bespoke engines. In the Gordon Keeble, the Chevy V8 produced around 300 horsepower and a strong torque curve that gave the car spirited acceleration and effortless cruising capability on long highways. The engine's growl was deep and commanding, a perfect complement to the car's poised handling and comfortable GT setup. The blend of a big American V8's brute force with the car's balanced chassis and European finesse made it a joy to drive, whether carving through twisty country roads or covering miles on the open road in sublime comfort. The story behind the Gordon Keeble's badge is equally fascinating and tinged with irony. The tortoise emblem, so unassuming and almost whimsical, was an inside joke referencing the slow and frustrating production delays the company faced. The brand's ambition was great, but its resources were limited, and the challenges of setting up production meant the car's development and manufacturing timeline dragged on longer than expected. This tortoise symbol thus became an emblem not just of patience, but also of the plucky determination of the company's founders and engineers to create something special despite obstacles. Ultimately, only 99 Gordon Keeble GK1s were produced before the company folded, making it exceptionally rare today. These cars were mostly hand-assembled, giving each one a bespoke quality rarely found in larger, mass-produced GTs. The limited production run means that surviving examples are treasured by collectors who prize their unique combination of international influences, rare status, and genuine driving pleasure. Owners of the Gordon Keeble often describe it as a beautifully made bullet, capturing how it embodies both elegance and speed. Its demeanor is dual, equally at home cruising sedately through the English countryside or launching aggressively onto the French autoroute, where its powertrain and aerodynamic shape shine. The suspension and chassis were designed to deliver comfort on long journeys without sacrificing the agility needed for spirited driving. It was a GT car that promised and delivered the best of both worlds. Despite its short life and small production, the Gordon Keeble GK1 has earned a special place in automotive history. It represents the era when small manufacturers dared to dream big, combining craftsmanship and style from different corners of the world to build cars that stood out in a crowded field. Its bare-tone designed body remains a highlight of the 1960s design, while the Chevy V8 ensures it still thrills behind the wheel. In modern times, the Gordon Keeble is not just a collectible, it's a testament to the passion and resilience of a brand that dared to blend continents and cultures into a singular, compelling automobile. It's a reminder that sometimes the most extraordinary cars aren't the ones that sell by the millions, but those rare few that leave a lasting impression through their distinct character, bold vision, and undeniable charm. To drive or own a Gordon Keeble GK1 today is to connect with a piece of automotive artistry and history that few others can offer. A beautifully crafted bullet that continues to captivate and inspire decades after its creation.
The 1970 Iso Lele stands as a remarkable and somewhat underrated masterpiece of the grand touring world, a fascinating car that embodies the resilience and creativity of a company forced to rethink its entire approach midstream. Born from the ashes of a failed deal with Lamborghini, where Iso originally hoped to use the iconic Lamborghini V12 engine, the Lele's story is one of adaptation and bold decision-making. When that partnership crumbled, Iso turned to dependable and powerful American V8s to breathe life into their new creation, a move that would shape the character and soul of this striking Italian coupe forever. What makes the Iso Lele especially captivating is how it managed to combine disparate elements into a coherent and compelling whole. The car's design was entrusted to the legendary Marcello Gandini, working for the famed Bertone design house, whose work was already revolutionizing the aesthetics of supercars and GTs. Gandini's touch on the Lele resulted in a sharp, angular body that perfectly captured the 1970s spirit,
a time when clean, geometric lines and aggressive proportions were replacing the curvy silhouettes of the 60s. The Lele silhouette is low and wide, with a poised stance that balances elegance and menace. Its crisp edges and subtle creases define a car that looks fast even when standing still, and the overall package is one of refined aggression rather than flamboyance. Beneath this sophisticated exterior, the Lele hid a beating American heart, either a 5.8-liter Ford Cleveland V8 or a 5.7-liter Chevrolet small block V8, depending on customer preference. These engines were a pragmatic choice, offering reliable power and torque in a package that was easier to maintain than many exotic European power plants of the era. With around 300 to 325 horsepower, the Lele was no slouch. It could comfortably reach speeds of up to 140 miles per hour, delivering the kind of effortless speed and strong acceleration expected of a true grand tourer. The American V8's broad power band gave the Lele a relaxed, smooth cruising ability on highways, making it a perfect companion for long-distance drives across Europe or America. But it also had enough punch to surprise sports car enthusiasts on back roads or winding mountain passes. Inside, the Lele offered a sanctuary of understated luxury, with an interior that prioritized driver comfort and style over flashy gimmicks. The dashboard was clean and functional, focused on providing essential information with clarity rather than overwhelming the driver with buttons or unnecessary technology. This subtlety made the Lele a car for those who appreciated quality and sophistication, rather than mere ostentation. The Lele's reputation extended beyond its mechanical and aesthetic qualities. It became a vehicle of choice for rock stars, actors, and cultural icons of the 1970s who wanted to express their exclusivity without screaming supercar at every turn. Unlike the more ostentatious Ferraris or Lamborghinis of the day, the Iso Lele was a quietly confident statement of taste, sophistication, and individuality. Its rarity, fewer than 300 examples were built, only enhanced this allure, creating an aura of mystery and desirability that persists among collectors today. Unfortunately, like many small manufacturers of its era, Iso struggled financially, and the Lele's production run was limited by economic realities as much as by market tastes. Yet, despite its relatively short life and low production numbers, the Iso Lele carved out a niche that few other cars could match. It remains an exemplar of the grand touring ideal, a car that marries exotic styling and spirited performance with comfort and usability, creating an experience that is both thrilling and refined. Today, the Iso Lele is a prized collector's car, celebrated not just for its stunning design or its powerful V8s, but for the story it tells. A story of a bold Italian company daring to think differently, adapting on the fly, and creating something truly special against the odds. Driving a Lele today is like stepping back into a pivotal moment in automotive history, when international influences converged to produce cars that were as much art as machines, and when the spirit of the open road was alive with possibility and passion. In every curve, every line, and every rumble from its American heart, the Iso Lele whispers a tale of resilience, elegance, and raw, unfiltered ambition. It is a car for those who seek more than just transportation, a car for those who want to own a piece of history that still turns heads and sparks conversations more than 50 years after its creation.
The 1969 Bristol 411 Series 1 represents an extraordinary chapter in automotive history, one where craftsmanship, exclusivity, and subtlety converged to create a grand tour unlike any other. Bristol Cars was never about mass production or flamboyant design. Instead, it was a company built for a very particular kind of buyer. The British gentleman who sought luxury and performance, but rejected the ostentation that often accompanied marques like Aston Martin, Jaguar, or Ferrari. The 411 was the embodiment of that ethos, quietly powerful, incredibly well made, and steeped in a tradition of exquisite British engineering combined with American muscle under the hood. At the heart of the 411 Series 1 was its distinctive engine choice, a 383 cubic inch Chrysler V8, displacing nearly 6 liters of American muscle power. This wasn't a high-revving race motor, but a torquey, smooth powerhouse engineered for effortless cruising. Unlike the loud and aggressive V8s of muscle cars, the Chrysler engine in the Bristol was almost eerily quiet, delivering a hushed, refined growl that seemed almost out of place in a car of this era and size. The powertrain was mated to a robust transmission that provided both relaxed highway cruising and spirited bursts of speed, allowing the 411 to reach a top speed of around 140 miles per hour, a remarkable figure for a luxury coupe of its time. The performance, however, was just one side of the story. The 411 was hand-built in the most traditional and painstaking manner, with fewer than 300 units crafted over multiple series. Each car was a unique work of art, a testament to Bristol's commitment to bespoke quality. The body design was timeless and elegant, featuring smooth, flowing lines that eschewed flashiness for refinement. Its silhouette was stately yet athletic, hinting at performance without shouting for attention. In an era when many manufacturers chased aggressive styling and bold colors, the 411 stood apart as a paragon of understated British luxury. Inside, the Bristol 411 was nothing short of spectacular. The cabin was a sanctuary of refined materials and expert craftsmanship. Hand-stitched leather wrapped the seats, doors, and dashboard, with rich wood veneers providing warmth and a tactile connection to the car's artisan roots. Every control was thoughtfully placed, designed for ease of use and tactile pleasure rather than complexity or gimmicks. Unlike the sporty and sometimes harsh interiors of contemporaries, the 411 prioritized comfort and quiet sophistication. It was a car meant for the long haul, whether a cross-country trip or a leisurely drive through the countryside, offering both driver and passengers an environment of calm luxury and tactile delight. Driving the 411 was an exercise in restrained power and refined control. Its chassis and suspension were tuned not for aggressive cornering or track day thrills, but for a composed, comfortable ride that could handle both winding country roads and high-speed motorways with equal poise. The steering was precise but effortless, the brakes confident, and the overall balance of the car ensured that every journey felt like a carefully choreographed dance between man, machine, and road. It was the kind of car that invited thoughtful driving, where each input was rewarded with smooth response rather than abrupt feedback. What truly set the 411 apart was its aura and clientele. This was a car for the quietly wealthy, the connoisseurs of taste who valued rarity and refinement above flashy badges or conspicuous displays of wealth. Imagine the 411 parked discreetly outside a private members club in Mayfair or a stately English country manor, never shouting for attention, but always commanding respect. The car fit perfectly in an exclusive world where subtlety and quality were the highest currency. Its eccentricities, from the hand-built nature to the choice of a powerful yet silent American V8, made it a conversation piece for those in the know and a secret treasure hidden from the wider automotive masses. Over time, the 411 Series 1 has become a symbol of an era when car makers could blend the best of two worlds, the engineering reliability and brute force of American V8s, with the meticulous craftsmanship and timeless design of British coach building. This balance is rare in automotive history, and it has ensured the 411's place as a treasured classic today. Collectors prize these cars not only for their rarity, but for the unique character they exude, a blend of power, elegance, and eccentricity that few other cars can match. For modern enthusiasts, owning a Bristol 411 is more than just possessing a rare classic. It's about embracing a philosophy of car ownership that values quiet distinction and understated excellence. It's a chance to connect with a moment in time when cars were as much about personality and craftsmanship as speed and technology. The Bristol 411 Series 1 remains a living testament to the art of automotive refinement, a car that even decades later whispers its presence with the subtlety of a gentleman's secret, a rare jewel in the crown of classic British motoring.